Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, folks, I have a new Robotech video. Going to be taking some time talking about some Robotech, and specifically, I'm actually going to be talking about a Robotech campaign I had put together quite a while ago. It was the Palladium Books version of Robotech, the first edition. And I used some of the source books and everything, but realistically, for this, you would only need the core rule book. But essentially, I explored the idea of Earth during the Macross Saga, specifically after the SDF-1 had done the space fold jump, which would pretty much make the SDF-1 pretty much land it past Pluto with a big chunk of Macross City and some of the ocean. And, well, for those who watch the series, they already know this part, but essentially, it was inspired a little bit by Robotech Battlecry because during the events of Robotech Battlecry, the pilot that you are playing as, actually is one of the pilots that gets stranded on Earth while the SDF-1 does its space fold jump. Now, with that being said, I did take a little bit of artistic license with this one to make it all work, but I think you'll all find this very interesting. However, really quickly, folks, just want to ask people for support, and thank everyone actually that's been supporting my channel. The likes, the comments, the subscriptions, the shares, that all helps me out as a YouTube channel, as well as want to give a special thank you to the Patreon supporters, because essentially their support provides the channel with a bit of a budget. With that being said, there is a link down below in the video description. Go on, check that out. Definitely really helps me out as a growing channel. Anyway, let's get into the meat and the potatoes of the campaign. Now, we do know that during Macross Day, I think that's what they call it, was Macross Day. I can't quite remember, but essentially they were celebrating the launch of the SDF-1. Brigtai and his forces would show up. The Zentraedi would show up, and they would launch an assault against Earth. And then, of course, things would happen, basically a bunch of big smashy mechs. Macross City would see a bunch of damage, and essentially we would see our first interstellar war here on Earth. Now, during the events, the SDF-1 would do a spacefold jump, and like I said, it would end up past Pluto. Brigtai would actually gather his fleet and go after the SDF-1. They would try to pursue it, figure out where it went, so on and so forth. Well, the idea of my campaign is he didn't do that completely. He actually only took 2/3 of his fleet to go track down the SDF-1, leaving a third of his fleet here near Earth. Now, of course, during the process, Earth Defense Forces would find out that the third of the fleet was within nearby orbit of the Earth. I think actually what I did is I hid the fleet by the moon, but essentially through satellites, the various armor units and things of that nature, basically the RDF did find out that there was still Zentraedi near Earth, near the planet Earth. And essentially, once that was found out, some plans were made, and essentially that's when the cultural exchange of war would begin. And it would roll out with a series of different things. We had, such things as various probing attacks by the Zentraedi. We also I had the players go through the process of defending a carrier fleet that was actually getting hit by the Zentraedi as well, because the carrier fleets, well, they obviously have a lot of Veritechs, and they have places for Veritechs to land. So that became a priority target for the Zentraedi forces. Another one that was also hit was airfields. Airfields is also another great target for the Zentraedi to hit, and it's a great target for players to defend, as well as aircraft manufacturing, any type of military manufacturing, really, the Zentraedi would hit, but they would definitely go after like anything that's related to like the Destroids, to the Veritechs, things of that nature. And that's kind of what they were focused on hitting. And essentially, my players was going through the process of trying to fight the Zentraedi off of these important facilities. Now, over time, basically what they would find out is well, pretty much what the Zentraedi found out in the series is, well, the humans are primitive and our weapons are primitive, but we're very daring and we're very capable. And I even had my players go on the offensive once or twice against the Zentraedi forces in space, using super Veritechs and armored Veritechs, things of that nature. Actually, I think we only used super Veritechs, and we also used a bunch of the sleds, because essentially you got to go so fast to break the Earth's barrier, blah, blah, blah. It's all kind of scientific math stuff, but basically a standard Veritech can't break the Earth's barrier, but if you have the rocket sled or if you have a super Veritech, you can break the Earth's atmospheric barrier. And that's how we went on the offensive. Now, another thing, too, that I did as a part of the process is once the Zentraedi figured out that Earth was using satellites to track the Zentraedi, localized Zentraedi movements, they started going after the satellites, which made the players once again go on the defensive and defend said satellites. And then pretty much I would do very different variations of missions throughout. Now, during the process, I would feed the players rumors about the SDF-1, and actually at some point I actually did start feeding them actually real news about the SDF-1. Understand that for a majority of its 2-year journey, it was out of radio contact with Earth. Also, during the process of all this happening, the news media pretty much acted as a propaganda machine for the RDF. One reason was to basically increase recruitment. Obviously, the RDF is taking casualties. We need more men. And of course, kind of need to make the Zentraedi look like a bunch of murderous savages in the process, and, bolster the RDF and make it seem like that they're actually winning the war, when realistically, yeah, if they really want to wipe Earth, they could have. Now, during the process of this, too, I found it as a great time to introduce the VF-1R model, especially towards the end, just as the SDF-1 was returning. So actually, one of my players actually did have a VF-1R as the squadron commander, which was neat because at that moment, it pretty much would have been a brand new variant of the Veritech fighters, and it was a great way to introduce them. Now, with that being said, once the SDF-1 returned, I pretty much stationed the players on the SDF-1 because, well, we know what happens during the incident known as the Reign of Death. I believe it's actually called Chiron's Reign of Death, but either ways. Anyway, folks, hopefully, maybe you might be able to use this as a campaign idea for your Robotech campaign. Hopefully, you all enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourselves a wonderful day.